We've just closed a month in which the U.S. House of Representatives was only in session 9 out of 31 days. Should be relatively scandal-free, but it wasn't. We've got our eyes on the Hill. This is Faith Chatham, and the opinions are my own. The hallowed halls of Congress have never been noted for chastity, let alone sexual purity, despite the rumblings of the saber of the so-called moral majority. Voyeurism and gossip ranks high on the favored pastimes of many of our nation's supposed to be esteemed leaders, especially among those who seem too busy to be burdened with seeking real solutions to the spiral of wealth away from the American middle class, are policies which have propelled our nation into being the only nation in the world which has not seen a decline in the death of women in childbirth. From its inception, this nation's leaders have not been free of scandal, especially sexual scandal. If their contribution had been rejected based on the litmus test of sexual morality, we would not have had the Declaration of Independence, the many contributions of Benjamin Franklin, the service of Dwight D. Eisenhower, or the New Deal of FDR. That being said, however, the revelation of the indictment of Speaker of the House Dennis Haslett for felonies in connection with his allegedly paying over $1 million in hush money to prevent public disclosure of his alleged sexual improprieties with one of his former male students during his days as a wrestling coach and high school teacher has sent Washington and this nation reeling this past week. It's hard to conceive that someone with such a past would have the nerve to run for public office, let alone be allowed to rise in the ranks to stand in judgment of the Democratic inhabitant of the White House in impeachment proceedings. Haslett's secret remained hidden for decades and came out after his retirement as Speaker of the House. Attempts to keep it hidden by allegedly paying over $1 million in hush money has led to his indictment on felony offenses into court this week. This indictment coming when confidence in the U.S. House and Senate is already at an all-time low, again returns our nation's focus to that cadre of Republican congressional leaders who led the charge in impeachment proceedings against the Democratic occupant of the White House. Granted, there is more than enough shame to go around, but somehow with recent revelations concerning former Speaker Haslett and the prior confession of Newt Gingrich that he was engaging in extramarital affairs at the very time that he was making the talk show runs and standing in the halls of Congress condemning the president and calling for him impeachment, along with knowledge that when Bob Livingston was elected Speaker, he refused to take the oath of office when he was presented with the evidence that would come out against him about his own sexual impropriety. We can't forget Tom DeLay, and we cannot forget Bob Barr. Bob Barr was one of the chief players in Clinton's impeachment proceedings. There's a photograph of Bob Barr licking whipped cream off of the bosom of a young woman at one of the political fundraisers. Seeing this lineup of illustrious leaders, many of whom were second in line for succession to the presidency only after the vice president, somehow they make the sexual antics of old Ben Franklin appear mild and mellow in retrospect. I think the moral majority should just retire from politics. It obviously hasn't taken despite their expenditures on these guys. Even though Charlie Wilson was far from my favorite member of Congress, at least he was not a hypocrite. Charlie never pretended to be sexually moral. He didn't thump the Bible and pretend to be something that obviously he was not. After I taped this segment, I read a quote in the Washington Post by Orrin Kerr, and it is a good summary. If I understand the history correctly, in the 1990s, the president was impeached for lying about a sexual affair by a House of Representatives led by a man, Newt Gingrich, who was also then hiding a sexual affair, who was supposed to be replaced by another congressman, Bob Livingston, who stepped down when forced to reveal that he too was having a sexual affair, which led to the election of a new Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert. Dennis Hastert has now been indicted for lying about payments covering up his sexual conduct with a boy. Yikes. New York Times conservative columnist David Brooks stated in a PBS interview that President Obama has run an amazingly scandal-free administration. Brooks pointed out that not only has President Obama, but the people he has chosen to be around him have been pretty scandal-free. Brooks says there are people in Washington who do set standards of integrity, who do seem to attract people of quality. And he continued and said, I think that's probably true of this current group, meaning those in the White House. Brooks said, I hope that it's also true of the leadership that's currently in Congress. I agree with David Brooks. I too would hope that it's true of the current leadership in Congress. However, the verdict is still out. This is Faith Chatham. The opinions are my own. My eyes are on the hill.